Welcome to Around the Farm. I'm Steve Greggerson here with Site Director Andy Hite, and we want to take you around the farm and show you what's happening this month.
Well,
anything going on?
Oh, just a little. We've had a few school groups. We've had lots of fun with the kids so far this year. We're just really getting started with the schools. We got a lot more to come. May is just every day is booked. We had a school call the other day, so the forecast is for rain. It says, do I have any options? I said, well, you've got two. She said, what's that? I said, well, I've got one day here that you could have, but that's the only day I've got open the rest of the year. And I said, that won't work. She says, what's option two? I said, raincoats.
They did have their trash bags.
They had their rain gear on.
All kind of stuff on today.
So they had taken option B.
Well, that's good. They seem to have a good time. They're a nice bunch of kids.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, we had a good time. Now we're sitting here. We've talked about this room for months, it seems like. We've taken some pictures of the progress, and we're sitting here in your new classroom.
This is great too, I'll tell you.
And what I was afraid of has come to fruition. You're over here by yourself, and
poor little kids are just getting warped now.
Yeah, I know. But
I just make it up as I go.
It is so nice to just watch it, and I've used it for a couple bigger adult groups. It is nice to have the space that we've never had before. You don't know how to act. So.
And it's fascinating. As the kids come in, they're immediately attracted to go out and look out the windows and just like, wow, And I think, well, that's what the adults will do as they come in too. I'm sure that's going to be the big attraction.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing when you look at the things that we've got in here, to think that almost all of this stuff was in that little room over by the gift shop.
I'm still not sure how we got it done, but we made it.
I've had several people have come in and they've looked around and said, you didn't have that before. Well, yeah, we had all of this before. It just was set up so much differently. I think this is going to be very conducive for people to be able to come in and actually look around. We've got, of course, Bob the fiberglass horse is new. He's not new. We've had him for a long time. I just never had a really good place to exhibit Bob, and we've got a little more to finish right there. That's going to be the tools of the canal builder. We've got a wheelbarrow that will be in there. We're going to put some old hand tools in there, so people will get an idea when they look out at the canal, then look at the tools. I think it'll really start to make a connection with them that, this really was a tremendous physically demanding project that the state of Ohio undertook in 1825. So we've got Bob. People have asked what's on Bob. He's wearing his fly drape, so that if the weather's hot and the flies won't bother him so much. We worry about Bob. He just stands there. He doesn't eat much. He hasn't anything to drink for a long while.
I was kind of concerned he didn't have any oats this morning there. So,
but we've got that's new. The other things, the ironwork that you see next to that was there. We just didn't have it exhibited maybe quite as well as we are now. One thing that is new besides Bob is right beside that. I know what you're telling kids, but it's not a tombstone.
I don't tell them that.
It's not how many canaligators or how many kids the canaligators ate last year.
Yeah, that's what I tell them.
If you've traveled the National Road, you're used to seeing mile markers. And that's what this was. This was a mile marker that was along the Miami and Erie Canal. It was up in the Newport area, and it's a mile marker 112. What that means is when you came to that mile marker, you had traveled 112 miles from Cincinnati. So they knew where they were on the canal. That was a really neat piece to get. I've seen some in other places, but this is about as complete a mile marker as I've seen. It was in really good shape. It's not really too much worse for wear. So we're glad to have that here. Obviously, we've got the big windows. People are, you're right, they're automatically drawn to those windows, which is exactly what we wanted. And it's funny because even though you had basically the same view when the patio was here, it's such a different perspective that it's like you're looking at it for the very first time.
It is. I mean, you know, it was neat to look over the patio wall when the weather was good out here and stuff, and the kids always enjoyed looking. But now this just gives you I just like to say a different perspective. You're out just a little bit further because of the length of the room itself being taken out a little bit, and it just kind of puts you in the trees like you're sitting up in a tree looking out over the canal and the river, and it's neat.
It's a great view.
It sure is.
Then we've got another case. You know, those are braces for the locks, and people, if you look at that, you know, I think that maybe starts to give people an idea of the dimension of things. You know, nothing on the canal was small particularly, and you know, of course, that's all ironwork. This is before, you know, in the 1825, 1830 era. You know, that's before steel has really come around. So that's all ironwork. We got nails and things like that in the bottom there that came out of various places on the canal. We've got the piece of wood there beside it underneath our map. That's a tough piece to interpret maybe, but it's actually sitting there upside down. That's the top of a lock gate. But I haven't figured out a way yet that would look good to turn it the way that it needs to be.
Might be a little tough to do, but.
And I think one of the prizes in this collection is the map there. That's a great map from the 1890s. It shows, you have to really look at it, but it shows the canal routes from the Ohioan area and the Miamian area are both on there. But somebody put them on in pencil.
Oh.
So you've got to really, really look, and you just get a good look at, you know, again, the scope of the canal, I think. And we've got some more timbers and things like that there beside it. And again, you think about, just like the iron is basically handmade, all these timbers, all the lock stones, all that stuff that you see associated with the canal, you have to remember that was all done by hand. You know, you might have a pit saw, but you know, that would have been about it. So, you know, you look at the size of those timbers and realize that's just a portion of a piece of wood. It's just, it's hard. You kind of stand here, sometimes I stand out here, you know, when it's quiet and say, well, we finally made it.
No, it's just been a real joy to be able to use this room. I mean, bringing the kids in, they've got plenty of room to sit and be very comfortable, and lots of things to look at. You know, it really helps explain instead of just trying to describe to kids what things are. It really does make a difference to be able to show them and be able to let them look. And I notice that before we start and after we finish, a lot of times or when they're finished eating lunch, they'll go back and look and ask you questions, and that's just a good feel that they're interested enough to find out these things and get an idea what the canal was all about.
And you know, we got a bench there right around. I imagine this summer that bench is going to get used a great deal. I can just imagine people coming out and just plopping down and watching the world go by from our window.
You know, with a membership, you come out 4 days a week and
that's right.
Just sit and relax and enjoy. So you know, it wouldn't cost you anything besides your membership.
No, it did. You know, you know, and Joe's right. You can watch a boat go by at least once or twice a day. So you know, there's so many amenities that we've not had before. We've got the two storage areas there. One, and I guess I'm easily satisfied because I have 60 chairs that match, and 10 tables that all match. And obviously, when you look at the size of this room, purposely that's so that we can do a catered dinner. We can do events where people can sit at tables and work on projects. This is going to be, I think, a good space that we want to make available to the community for meetings and workshops and things like that, because there's especially on days when we're not open, there's no reason why people couldn't use this. And I'm in the 21st century.
Oh yeah?
Yep.
Uh-oh.
Yep. We've got the LCD projector hanging from the ceiling. We've got Wi-Fi hotspot out here.
Whoa,
We're wireless in the museum.
great, great.
Now that doesn't mean you can bring your iPad and watch Netflix movies in between the kids.
Darn, I could have done a video and just held it up and
No.
wouldn't have had to say a word.
I know that wouldn't happen. And of course, we've got the panels that were in the canal room, and it's really kind of, even those are amazing that when you look at spread out the way we spread them out. Gee, many those were in that.
Yeah, and they're so much more accessible. You can walk right up to them. There's nothing to keep you from going up there.
Except the model of the canal boat.
Well, yeah, but it's close enough. You can get up there.
Yeah. And this actually shows off better in here, I think.
It does.
It's just, the potential for this room is just really, I think, limitless. And again, I know we've said it before, and we'll probably say it all kinds of times. We can't say thank you to our funders enough. When you think about the Friends Council undertook this project, and people basically, they were either from Piqua or had Piqua ties that partnered with the Ohio Historical Society with some capital money that some money that they had available. It wasn't really capital money. Some grants and donations that we got from some foundations, and then the individual donations really have made this all possible. This was an effort of so many different people. Joe among them, and he won't be bashful to tell you that either.
I noticed that.
That's his spot right. He said that's his spot right there. So as long as Joe doesn't mark his spot, we'll be all right. But and I think this is something. We're kidding Joe about this, but this is something that I think people that have been a part of this can walk in and take pride in the fact that, hey, I really made this happen. This is something that is going to benefit so many visitors in so many different ways.
Right.
That
it's just a great place, and like you said, the business meetings or gatherings of different kinds. I mean, what more could you ask for? I mean, it's just a perfect place to be, and I guess if you're having a business meeting, it's going to be hard to keep on track with those big windows.
Well, we can put the blinds down, and sorry, Joe. That hurt, did it? We can put the blinds down if we need to.
Yeah, that's true. I'd have to if I was here. I would get too distracted trying to watch. But
we're just so pleased with it, and we will officially. We've been using the room. Obviously, we've been using it for a while now. We've used it for some groups. We've done our first luncheon in here. Mm-hmm. Worked out very well.
It did. Very well.
Caterer was quite pleased. The way that worked out. And on June 14th, that's going to be our next event here at the site. We're going to roll lots of things in that day. It's going to be a day of a lot of activity. The 14th will be the official dedication of the room. We'll extend official invitations to our funders, to people that have a stake in this in one way. We want as many stakeholders here that day as we can get. So that's going to be a great deal. We'll do that about 1:30. We'll do it after the 12:30 boat ride, so that when people come up the hill, we're going to herd them right into this room. And they're not going to have any choice. But it's something I hope that people can take pride in. This building had not changed. The footprint of the building hadn't changed since it was built opened in the spring of '72. So it's used, I think, so many more different ways than what it was ever envisioned to be used. This really does start to fit the needs of the site much more. And we've got lots of other things, other projects, other things we like to do, but this is such a great start. If we didn't do anything else.
Yes, this is such a nice addition. I mean, it really rounds us out in a lot of ways to to give us a way to tell the story of the area and the canal and Colonel Johnston. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the biggie.
So, okay, well, let's go back to June. We're going to do the dedication at 1:30. It's also Flag Day.
Right.
So I think one of the things we'd like to talk about a little bit, and we won't do it today, although Joe said we've got plenty of capability today, but we won't do that today.
Okay.
We'll talk somehow a little bit about the different nations' flags that have flown over this site. And then we're also going to do a flag retirement ceremony. If nobody's ever seen one of those, it's pretty powerful.
It is. It's a very moving kind of ceremony that very respectful and very dignified.
And so, you know, if somebody does have an American flag that is a little worse for wear, you know, bring it out that day. And, you know, the neat thing about that day, thanks to the Miami Valley Corvette Club, and you can talk a little bit more about that, about what they're committed to do.
Well, we basically are going to, I guess, rent the farm that day, so to speak.
Yeah.
We're going to make sure everybody has, admission is free to get in that day. We're going to have our 3rd annual and 2nd Corvette Club car show that day. It doesn't just mean Corvettes, it means any kind of cars you'd like to put into a show to show people, trucks, motorcycles. We've even got some guys bringing their farm tractors out there restored, which is pretty good for the Johnston Farm to have the tractors
Fits
here,
right
too.
in.
It does. Some food's going to be here. Just going to be a good time for everybody. But like I say, we're going to cover everybody's admission, so you can get in, you can visit the farm, you can visit the house, you can come see the museum. We're going to charge a little bit to get on the boat.
Charge a little bit for the canal boat, but
it's worth it. It's to get a canal boat ride is well worth your time and money, and just kind of try to make this just one heck of a big day for the farm and really celebrate what we've got here.
And you know, I think one of the big things is it's free admission. You know, now you probably heard my heart go.
But I did,
but that's a way too that we can say to people, thank you for what you've done.
Right.
And you know, I was really happy as we were developing this idea for the program, or for that weekend, that the Corvette Club was more than willing to do that. And so, you know, that's just it's another thing that we just can't say thank you enough to people.
And we feel like that this is a great place for a show. I mean, there's lots of space and there's lots of things to do besides just walk around and look at cars for people who bring their cars or people who come to look at cars. There's lots of other things to do, so you can make a heck of a day out of it. And you know, I guess the thing I have to kind of think about is a little bit, if you bring mom, dad, and 2 or 3 kids, we're going to get you in free. Heck, the money you save getting in, come in, buy a membership, and then you can come to the farm all summer and it doesn't cost you a penny.
There you go.
Hey, I get my brain working, well, you know, once or twice a year, so it, you know, I thought about that. I thought, well, gee, that's a good way to get in free, get a membership and get in free the rest of the year. So, and you get all kind of newsletters and you find out what's going on.
Update, you know what's going on. I always encourage people to go to our website, johnstonfarmohio.com. That'll lead you to the blog. I think we're Twittering and I don't know what all that is. Yeah, so you know we really are into the social media things to try to let people know what's going on. In July, we've got our Chautauqua style event called History Alive at the Johnston Farm. We're going to have 2 scholars here on Friday and Saturday that will do first person. That they become the people that they have studied, and really, you know, you really feel like you're with that historical figure. We'll talk much more about that as we get closer, but that's going to be in July. The 11th and 12th will be the presentations. Then on Sunday the 13th, of course, we'll still have some, we'll have some encampment people, some demonstrators, things like that here. So the whole weekend, again, there's things to do. If you're a Friends member, it's, we haven't worked out all the details yet, so we'll keep people abreast of how that's going. But that should be a great event.
That will be, I think.
We've gotten some help on that on funding with La Quinta Inn has helped us out. The Miami County Foundation has helped us out on that one. We've got some in-kind things from Main Street Piqua and from the mall, and so there's lots of people that have pulled together to make, I think, what can be a really outstanding weekend for people here at the Johnston Farm. The Ohio Historical Society's providing 2 tents for us. We'll have everything outside under a tent, because we hope that this room isn't nearly big enough. On Saturday afternoon, both of the scholars, though, will be in here doing a presentation on how to develop a living history character. So if you don't have to be involved with living history here, you do it someplace else, and you'd like to know a little bit more about what it takes to really become that first person. A first person history is hard.
I would think it would be very difficult.
It's tough to do. It's tough to do well. And so they're going to talk about that. And again, we'll be able to use our room in August. We've got our evening in the canal, and we're going to have dinner overlooking the canal this year.
That's going to be great.
We had always kind of played with the idea of having dinner on the patio, but it's either too hot or too cold, or the wind is blowing, or the bugs are flying, and we don't have to worry about any of that now.
Nope. It's just nice, comfortable, 70 degrees all the time in here. No critters. Well, Aiden might come, so he's kind of a critter. So his little brother won't, though. He is a critter. So.
So lots going on. We'll have our fall event, which that's October. That's a long ways away. We'll talk about that as we get closer. And Christmas on the farm again is in December. So, this is a place where lots is going on. With the space for real briefly, then we'll move on to some other stuff. The space where the canal room is now empty, and we're working on developing some exhibits in there for the summer. We're going to do a permanent exhibit on the Johnston farmhouse, how it was restored, those sorts of things going on there. For this summer, we're going to put some objects in about Piqua history as it relates to the time periods of the Johnston farm. And one of the things that we're going to have out here, it's already been promised by the library. And if people have never seen it, is the tree trunk with a cannonball in it.
Good. That's a neat piece.
That's a neat piece of history that's from this site, so it's going to be on exhibit. And then we're working on the potential of some partnering with the Ohio, the different Ohio tribes from this time period, and inviting them to come back and tell their story from the 1840s to what sometimes that's referred to as removal period,
right,
from the 1840s to the present. Because sometimes you get an idea that well, this didn't exist anymore. Well, no, that's not true. And so we want to be able to tell that story, because I don't know that there's really any place in Ohio that tells that story.
Not that I know of.
So we're working on that, because we really want to do as much as we can to expand and tell as much of this story as we possibly can. So you alluded to the Friends Council memberships.
Mm-hmm.
A family membership's $25 a year. That's one time for family 4 through the gate.
Right.
You get mom and dad at $8 a piece. That's $16. I did that.
I ran out of fingers, so I couldn't count that high.
And the kids are $4. So you've really got your cost right there. And you can get that. Come out to the farm. Give us a call. 773-2522. We'll be happy to answer questions or set you up with a Friends membership. We're working on a membership campaign now, and if somebody really would like to become a member and they haven't been approached, give us a call. And the other thing that we've got going right now,
I almost forgot that one.
And this, I think this can be a real premium, because every year that the Dayton Dragons sell out. They've got thousands of. They've got the longest sellout streak in professional sports, I think, don't they?
Yes, they still hold it, I believe.
That's so. We've been offered the opportunity to make available for people, if they would like to participate in a little bit of a raffle, one of the newly renovated suites at the stadium. We've got a suite reserved for Saturday, May 31st. I forget right off the top of my head who they're playing. I think it might be the Lugnuts. Come to think of it, I think it's the Lansing Lugnuts. And that, you buy your ticket for $10 and you can bring 19 of your friends, or 18 of your friends if you have a significant other.
Oh, okay.
Or as many friends as you can muster, but you're allowed up to 20 people in the box. And we got two parking passes to go with it. So, for $10,
that's not bad.
That's a chance to,
And even if you donate the $10 and don't win, you
still help the Johnston Farm, because this is a fundraiser through the Friends Council. Again, like everything, I want to keep, reminding people that since the management agreement's been in effect, every penny that's generated here stays here. So, these dollars stay here. Anything that would, from special events through the course of the year, that's all, a part of our funds that stay here. So, that's going on. That should be a lot of fun, because even if you don't particularly like baseball, a Dragons game is so much more than just baseball.
It sure is. It's a lot of fun. We've been able to go a couple of times, and it's a lot of fun.
They do a nice job with the product.
They do. They really do.
And that sale will go until, I think it's the 7th or 8th of May. So if you're interested in a ticket, they're $10 a piece, or 3 for $25. Give me a call out here. We'd be happy to make sure that you get your tickets, and that should be, that can be a great time for people. It's just really, the Dragons games are a lot of fun. We've gone several times and have enjoyed it every time we've gone. It's close by. It's a great facility. The suites are newly renovated. So, you can sit up there where people in stands always look at you and say, oh, it's those people. Well, this is a chance for you to become one of those people.
That's right.
And just enjoy yourself immensely. And so help, support us for that. And that, like I said, the game is May 30th. The 10th, the drawing, I think, is the 10th of May. And they're going to do the drawing down at Dragons, down at Fifth Third Field.
Oh, okay.
So, we're looking forward to that. So, that we've looked at the room. What I'd like to do something else today, since Joe said we got lots of time today. One of the things that when we first came to Piqua, and you started talking to people about John Johnston, I always kind of felt like early on that we were just getting, kind of a one-dimensional look at the guy. And the more that, that we've been here, the longer we've been in Piqua, the more that we look at John Johnston. He's a fellow that people really need to understand, that he had his fingers in so many things. He had so much of an impact on, the local area, Ohio history, national history. He really had a guy that had a lot of impact and nobody knows about, or very few people know about. I know when I taught Ohio history and American history, you never saw the name.
No, I never saw John Johnston's name. I knew he was from the area, but I never realized how far out his influence was.
Now, a little bit in Ohio history, some of the texts you might get a mention, but he's been a guy that has had such an influence and has never really been talked about. So several years ago, I put together this presentation that we called, Will the Real John Johnston Please Stand Up? And since we've got all this new tech capability today, I thought, we've looked at the room, we might as well unveil it and let people see, what all their donations and support are paid for. So
that's true.
We'll let the real John Johnston please stand up. Okay, like we said, when I came here, I felt like we were presenting a pretty one-dimensional picture of John Johnston. You said the name John Johnston, and the word that always the two words that I always heard was Indian agent. Mm-hmm. And that's not wrong, but that's not everything about John. So I'll tell you what, let's just for grins, let's kind of start with a little bit of a quiz, and let's see what you know, Mr. Greggerson.
Okay, I'm ready.
What we're going to try to do here is I'm going to give you a picture, and you try to tell me what person belonged to this event.
Okay.
All right? Are you smarter than a fourth grader?
Ooh, I could be in big trouble now.
Well, we had second graders today, so you're safe.
Well, that's true. I
All right.
might be able to get a couple.
All right, here we go.
Oh, Benjamin Franklin.
Sure, that's Benjamin Franklin. That was easy, right?
It was. Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson.
I missed this the last time we tried this.
Okay, this is Surrender Field at Yorktown.
Right, so it was George Washington.
It'd be George Washington, exactly. Now you'll be able to get this next one. I have complete faith.
Okay. Oh, good old Woody Hayes.
Yep.
In Clemson.
Yep, that was the Clemson game. Now, why were you able to do that?
Oh, I guess because they're in the, you see things about them, you read things about them, they're in the newspapers, the history books, and people that are well known.
But if you look at Benjamin Franklin and his kite, Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration, George Washington in the Surrender Field, and even Woody at the Clemson game, is that the whole person?
No, for sure not.
Yeah, and that's I think in my mind, which is probably not right, and depending on who you ask, they probably agree with that. Yeah, you could do that because that's what you see.
Right.
Is that fair assessment? Is there more to Benjamin Franklin than?
Oh, well, certainly all the things he did and invented and is known for, and diplomacy and on and on and on.
And same thing with Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, and even Woody Hayes. Woody had so many facets to his life. But when you see that name, again, when I came here, the thing that you almost always heard, and it wasn't derogatory, it wasn't bad, it wasn't wrong, was Indian agent. But is it any more, I guess my thought was, is it any more fair to this guy to pigeonhole him into one hole as it is to do this, as it was to Thomas Jefferson or George Washington or Woody Hayes?
Well, no, exactly, and I have to admit too that until I started working out here, that I wasn't nearly as informed about Johnston as I feel like I am now. That you get to reading about him and reading about what he accomplished and what he did. The man was really multi-talented and multi-involved in things.
So that's why I ask, will the real John Johnston please stand up? Now, he's almost always identified as an Indian agent, but he and his Upper Piqua farm, his farmhouse here that you see a picture of, was more than just an agency, more than just an Indian agency and his home. In fact, and this, most people in town know that there's a lot of different history that's associated with the land that he called home. 13,000 years ago, it was home to some of the first people that came to Ohio. You knew that, your history teacher, you knew that. Piqua Village, which was the big British trading post, that's adjoined his property. He didn't own that property. It was interesting though, the one arch nemesis of his life was William Wells. Guess who owned the Piqua site?
I'm going to guess William Wells.
William Wells was the first owner of record of that site. They were neighbors and they hated each other. Anthony Wayne, there's a picture of an Indian earthwork. Picture of the Piqua site. I almost got behind myself. Anthony Wayne built Fort Piqua right where we're sitting today, or pretty close to where we're sitting today, as a forward supply post prior to the Battle of Fallen Timbers. In fact, that's when Johnston first came here. It was his association with Wayne. And that's why this building is the shape that it is. It's sort of a representation of a blockhouse style construction. William Henry Harrison was here. He was a friend of John. John got to know Harrison when Harrison was an aide to Anthony Wayne, and he got to know Harrison at that point. And in 1812, when Harrison was appointed commander of the Western armies, Harrison and his army were right where we are today. Miami and Erie Canal came right up past where we are in here. Now you think about that today. Johnston was a canal commissioner, oversaw the construction of the canals from 1825 to 1836, and the canal went right past his house.
Isn't that unusual that that would happen just like that?
Well, it would make one wonder, wouldn't it?
Just a tad.
But actually, in word of explanation, I guess, originally they looked at coming up the Mad River Valley, and there wasn't enough water in that river valley to support it. So they moved it to the west, to the Great Miami, and Johnston just happened to be on the Great Miami. So anyway, during the Civil War, the 94th Ohio, you can see their flag right there on the left, and the 110th Ohio, both trained here. So, this place was a lot of things as well as being a family home and a site of a lot of this stuff. I like to think when you look at Johnston, I think we could compare him in a lot of ways to Jefferson. And all these guys during this age, think about Johnston was in Philadelphia at the time it was the nation's capital, so he would have known George Washington. He would have known Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and likely Benjamin Franklin and all those guys. So here's this guy out here in the West that was acquainted with the Founding Fathers. And, I think there's a lot of similarities between, Johnston and Jefferson. They had their fingers in so many different sorts of things. Like Jefferson, Johnston in his lifetime experienced some really great highs. Had some low times as well, just like Jefferson. Now, the one thing that Johnston didn't do that Jefferson did was, when Jefferson died, he was broke. Mm-hmm. And was begging money from anybody that he could beg money from. It doesn't appear Johnston had that issue. Now, he was never what you'd call hugely rich, but he was comfortable.
Right.
Henry Howe, who wrote a 2-volume set called Howe's Historical Collections of Ohio, described John Johnston as a man of sterling character. And Johnston had met Charles Dickens, and Dickens' explanation of Johnston was similar, although in Dickens' memoirs of his travels through Ohio in 1842, he doesn't name Johnston by name, but he talks about meeting an Indian agent at Upper Sandusky. And that's not a taller, older, silver-haired gentleman. Okay, that's John Johnston. So you think about it, he even knew Charles Dickens, or had met Charles Dickens. Now, there's a more modern historian, a fellow by the name of Andrew Caton, you're familiar with that name,
yes.
Wrote a lot of Civil War history. Caton's description of Johnston was a little less stellar. He described him as a failed merchant and a struggling law clerk. Now, both of those descriptions are correct because he did fail as a merchant. He was a struggling law clerk, but then he also was a man of sterling character when you look at a lot of the things that he did. So let's take a look at what or who Johnston was. Now, he was a son, for one thing. He was born to Stephen and Elizabeth Johnston in Ireland in 1775. In fact, he passed away in Washington, D.C. in February of 1861. And in some of Johnston's later writings, not too long before he passed away, Johnston had made reference once that he felt that he had been born on the eve of the birth of America, but that he feared he was going to die on the eve of its passing, because looking at the events coming with the Civil War. But he was born in Ireland in 1775. His parents were Stephen and Elizabeth. And he eventually, he emigrated to the United States at a very young age, and apparently came over by himself or accompanied by a priest. Now, we don't know whether that was an Episcopal priest, a Catholic priest, what that was, but we know that he was accompanied. Came here, settled in Sherman Valley in Pennsylvania, and eventually the rest of his family came over. He was a brother. He had 4 brothers and a sister. He was the youngest of the family, but he was the one that the rest of the family came west eventually when John acquired this property, and John pretty well took care of the family. Now, we have found, though, that his mother Elizabeth, we don't know much about his dad. Stephen seems to be a sort of a historical enigma. We just don't see much about Stephen. But his mother probably was the money in the family. She was French Huguenot, and left France for Great Britain, for the British Isles, early on before the issues in France got so bad that she could have potentially lost the family fortune or her life. So I think Mom probably had a lot to do with some of the early successes of Johnston. Okay, so he was a son, he was a brother, he was a family man. He was married to Rachel, who was 16 years young, or 10 years younger than he when they were married. Well, she was 10 years younger than he was throughout their life, I guess. So that wasn't going to change.
No, she never did catch up.
But he married her in Philadelphia. In fact, he roomed with her parents in the Robinson household. And so, here's this 16-year-old daughter living in the same household. You do the math. They end up being married. And they were married, and their honeymoon trip in 1802 was a horseback trip from eastern Pennsylvania to Fort Wayne, Indiana, to the Indian Agency in Fort Wayne. That was her honeymoon trip, a horseback ride, literally across the country at that point. And Rachel had been a girl that had been brought up in some level of affluence in Philadelphia. So here's this girl doing a horseback trip from Pennsylvania to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I can see her holding that. My wife says she would held out for the Caribbean cruise.
I think so too. She must have been a pretty tough lady.
I think she developed a pretty thick skin. She was a strong woman, and he was an adventurer. He first came here, as I said. Anthony Wayne had his forward supply post here. John came here 16, 17 years old, hauling supply wagons for Wayne's Army. So he was a bit of an adventurer as well. So here you get this guy. You start to get a picture of a fellow that was involved in lots of different things during his life. And each one of those things, I think, had something to do with shaping his life as he grew older. When he was driving the supply wagons is when he first came here. And in his writings, we start to see Johnston talking about that if he could ever buy land in the West, if he could ever buy land in Ohio, this would be the land that he would want to buy. So, early on, he did this, and we're pretty sure that when he and Rachel made their trip west to Fort Wayne, they likely would have stopped here. This would have been on the road to Fort Wayne at that time. And I can kind of picture, here's this 26-year-old guy, the 16-year-old girl who by this time is probably pretty well shell-shocked. I can see them standing, someplace around where the farmhouse is, and I can see John telling his new bride is, Rachel, someday we're going to own this land. And I imagine she was probably thinking to herself, yeah,
What
right.
have I done?
Yeah, what have I gotten into? But he was able to eventually in 1804 buy the property, began developing it as a residence in 1808, and then moved here latter part of 1811, first part of 1812, and his residence was here since then. So, he was an adventurer. He was also, as I said, he went to the Indian Agency in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Started out there as the factor. Now, the factor in an agency was the storekeeper. He was the guy that was doing the trading with the Indians. So early on in his life, he became well acquainted with the Great Lakes tribes, with the Great Lakes traditions and the woodland peoples. And I think that had to shape his, the way he looked at people. And one of the things we know too, there were a lot of traders in the Fort Wayne area that were not government agents. And Johnston wasn't very well received by those non-federal traders. John was developed pretty early on a real honest streak compared to the other traders he was dealing with. So, he started to that sterling character that you hear Hal talk about starts to come out at that point in time. In 1809, John was appointed agent and factor. The agent was the political guy, the factor was the storekeeper, so he held both posts. He replaced, guess who? William Wells. And so, there was, like I said, there was always some animosity, a lot of animosity between those two. He had bought this property in 1804, began developing in 1808. When he moved here in 1812, the federal government tapped him to come back into the federal service as Indian agent for Western Ohio. And his job then was to negotiate a situation as America entered the War of 1812, negotiate a situation where the Western tribes wouldn't fight necessarily for the Americans, but they also wouldn't fight for the British. And that was no small feat, I don't think, because usually when you negotiate a treaty like that, you're negotiating from a position of strength. But 1812, and we won't spend a ton of time on the history of the War of 1812 at that point, it was one military disaster after another. I think, I've used the analogy that I think the sense in America in 1812 was probably very much like the sense of America was after 9/11. Just that feeling of, okay, what's going to happen next?
Right.
And so, he was involved in a lot of things there. One thing a lot of people don't know, he functioned as a post doctor a good bit of the time, mainly because the post doctor was a drunk and was many times incapacitated. So Johnston learned to set limbs. He was apparently tremendously adept at setting broken bones. So, he was so you start to see that this guy was doing a little bit of everything.
The tools he used there, I probably wouldn't want to see the doctor too often.
No,
Those look a little...
those look a little nasty, don't they?
I think I'd probably avoid seeing Dr. John there if I could. That wouldn't be a lot of fun.
That would not be fun, you're right. He was a land speculator. He owned a bunch of land in Miami County. He owned some land in Indiana that he got in payment for services. He owns somewhere not quite 2,500 acres of land in Miami County.
Wow.
His farm here was about 500 acres, give or take a little bit. So what did they do with the other land, you ask? Glad you asked that question.
I was hoping you would have an answer for it.
Amazingly, as people came into the Piqua area and they wanted to settle, they needed land. Guess who?
John's got it for sale.
And the reason that was, a lot of people did that, and this isn't in a bad way, because remember the land ordinances, you know, you had to buy 640 acres of land.
Right.
And most people couldn't afford 640 acres. So if John owned that section, he could sell it off to whoever he wanted for whatever he wanted. So you start to see this guy's got his finger in a lot of different pies. He was an Ohio Canal Commissioner from 1825 to 1826, or 1836. So you see some overlap. You know, his federal agency here in Piqua went from 1811 to 1829, and he went out of state service in 1836. And the reason that he lost both of those jobs is, if you can imagine this with government, when the politics changed.
I can't imagine anybody doing that back then. I mean, it was pure and simple and innocent and upstanding and all those other things we like to believe.
Yeah, okay, you go ahead and believe that.
Well, I don't, unfortunately.
But he was a canal commissioner, oversaw the canal, brought it, originally when the Miami and Erie Canal was built, it was sort of a compromise to the Eastern Canal that went from Portsmouth to Cleveland. The state said, okay, we'll build a canal from Cincinnati, and it'll stop in Dayton. And sometime we'll complete it all the way to the Great Lakes. Well, in the meantime, what started to happen was Indiana began the Wabash and Erie Canal, and Indiana had no outlet to the Great Lakes at that point. So the Maumee River became very critical for the canal to follow that river. And that's how we got the canal completed up through this way. And so what started to happen in Ohio in 1837 was people began to really push, let's get this canal done, let's finish it. And Johnston was one of the people who was instrumental in getting that done. So you start to see this guy becoming the person that when somebody had an issue they wanted dealt with, you know, they went to Johnston. John was a religious leader in Piqua. He was one of the founders of St. James Episcopal Church in Piqua. His wife and he started the first female Bible society, and I'm sure you've read about that from your time at the local history office.
Right.
I can imagine, you know, the tale of she and a couple ladies driving up somebody's house to judge the person to see if they're worthy of membership in the Piqua Female Bible Society. I imagine that made your little heart go pity-pat when you saw those ladies come tottering up to your front door. But he was also savvy enough to know that if there were more churches, more denominations in Piqua, that would be more inviting to more people to come here, and if more people came here, they needed land. Who's going to have some land for them?
Good old John.
Yep. Kind of like the line in The Sound of Music where Max comes in and talks to Colonel Von Trapp. It's good for the family, it's good for Austria, and it doesn't hurt me either. You know, I think that some of that was going on here. He was also hugely interested in education. He was one of the founding trustees of Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio. Kenyon in those days was created as a seminary for Episcopal priests. Okay. He was on the board of of Miami University. See, your alma
yes.
You should know that.
I didn't know that, but I do know that Dr. Dorsey from Piqua was on the board at Miami at one time. But I didn't know John Johnston was.
Yep. And he was also on the visiting board of West Point.
Wow.
So, and he's constantly encouraging his children to do as well as they can in school, because he's pushing, you know, the importance of that education. And that's one of the mysteries we have too, because we don't know much about John's education. We don't know, you know, how long or where he went to school, you know, what the deal was. But you start to see an evolving picture of this guy that is just involved in everything. And one of the things that he was really involved in, and I got into a really heated debate one night with a lady at the mall when I made the statement that Johnston was a farmer. I don't know why that was a hot button, but boy, it was. You know, Johnston had hybrid apple trees that he had imported. He had 2 apple orchards of about 100 trees apiece, give or take a little bit. He brought those here from the Detroit area. He had merino sheep. Now, if you're a spinner, you know that the merino wool is what everybody wants. Merino sheep, you know where it came from?
No.
Came from Spain. King of Spain knew what he had with the merino sheep, and he had issued a decree that there should be no merino sheep ever leave Spain. John had merino sheep on his Upper Piqua farm. So, you know, I don't know what that tells you, but within 4 years of its invention, John had a threshing machine out here.
Wow.
And he allowed his neighbors to use it. Now, I'm sure that allowed didn't mean free. I can imagine that there's probably some remuneration going on back. Yes. And it's likely it could have been something in trade. Because one of the things we know about Johnston, when you look at some of his journals, the barter system was alive and well with John Johnston. And, you know, it had to be, because there wasn't that much hard money you know, circulating out here.
Right.
Another thing that maybe people aren't aware of was John was one of the founding members of the Miami County Agricultural Society and helped establish the Miami County Fair. So, you know, you start to see this guy, and I think the more you look at him, the bigger appreciation you get for the things that Johnston did. John was, he was a politician, I think in the best sense of the word, even though he lost his position to, because of William Henry Harrison becoming president, or Andrew Jackson, I'm sorry, Jackson becoming president, and a change in politics in Columbus in 1836, he was still as at home in the Miami County Courthouse, the State House in Columbus, and the nation's capital, as he was any place. And even though after 1842, Johnston ceased to have any official federal standing, he was still the guy that people came to. You know, he was still looked at as the go-to guy. And in fact, when he passed away in February of 1861, he was in Washington to do a couple things. One, to get a grandson appointed to West Point, and also to lobby Congress for money that he had spent out of pocket through the years here on his farm. So, you know, the stuff just keeps coming when you look at Johnston. And, you know, the last thing is he was an author. He wrote a lot of early history. Going back to Howe's Historical Collections of Ohio, we know that Henry Howe would write John really long letters and ask him a ton of questions. And Johnston would eventually, I probably on a winter evening or afternoon or somebody, sit down, and you can tell from his letters he's just going down and answering one question after another. There's no flow to the letter. It's just this happened, here's the people, and that sort of thing. So, and he was, by the time